Minister, thank you for your detailed contribution here today, and I do welcome the publication of the Indecon report. I've raised this with you at Foreign Affairs Committee and tabled parliamentary questions on a number of occasions. I think, firstly, just at the outset, I would like to personally commend you for the work that you've done yourself with regard to, as Minister for the Diaspora. I have to say, and I don't often say this to many government ministers, I do think you've added a great deal of energy to the role, and that role is a very important role. And I know from my own job as Foreign Affairs spokesperson for Fianna Fáil, I've had the pleasure of meeting many Irish communities abroad over the last number of months, and all of them speak very highly of your work and the work of your department. I think it's important that when good work is being done, that it's actually recognised, and I would like to put that on the record. I think a couple of things, maybe if I could, just from the report. Whilst the report is published, and I haven't, you've outlined the high-level items of it, I think we need a bit of time to read the report, and then to really the important piece on that then is what actions come from that. Because what is stark from the reading of the statistics within the report is the amount of people, and I know through my own office as well, that encounter some very grave difficulties when they're returning home. And I want to touch on a couple of them, because I do think there's actions that we can take quite quickly. And I raised this with you and Minister Coveney a number of months ago. If you take the insurance element of it, whilst I recognise in your speech that you've mentioned the new agreed protocol with Insurance Ireland, the anecdotal evidence that I certainly have from my own constituents in Dublin, Fingal and beyond, those who are returning home, is that insurance premia are still much higher for returning immigrants. I see you've noted a reduction in the number of insurance contracts that have been declined, but then I think we need to look at the premium cost itself. That is a big issue, and it is still an issue where certain insurance companies are not taking no claims record from driving experience abroad into account for people who may have driven here in Ireland, have now come back after a number of years, and they're basically being treated like a brand new driver, that none of that experience is happening. That's a big issue. It's a big cost. I've sent examples to yourself and to the Minister previously of people where the insurance cost per month is higher than the loan repayments on someone's car when they return, and that needs to change. I think in the year April 2016 to April 2017, we had about 28,000 people returning, and that's increasing, and I really, really welcome that, and I think that is good news for us. It's good news for our country. But motoring needs to be looked at. I think banking needs to be looked at as well. If you see 36% of returning immigrants have said opening a bank account, which is something that should be pretty simple, at home, was either difficult or very difficult. Now, that's something that we can address with the Irish Banking Federation. They should be brought in, and I would be suggesting that you should bring them in and invite them in and ask them as to why this is allowed to happen. Because what we're finding, certainly in the financial services realm, is that there's a two-tier system. There's one system for the people who've been here a number of years, and there's another system for those who are returning, and that should not be the way. And you've recognised that in your speech. But if you delve into it, further into it, more than 40% of people described transferring pensions or other savings as difficult or very difficult. So this whole area of financial services needs to be looked at, and that can be done under your watch and by your department. When you look as well at driving, I would ask you to do this. I had a parliamentary question down recently which asked about the reciprocal arrangements between driving licences between Ireland and other countries outside of the EU. We're not really at the top of the class on that. If I just give you a few examples of some of the countries that we have arrangements with: Australia, Gibraltar, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Japan, Jersey, South Africa, South Korea, Switzerland, New Zealand, Taiwan, and 4 of the provinces in Canada. Bar that, there's no other agreements. Now, I'd like to know from yourself and from your department, are we advancing agreements with other countries? That is a big problem for people, because whilst Minister Ross, in one of his few announcements over the last year, has actually mentioned a reduction in the requirement from 12 driving lessons to 6, that's good. But a lot of these people, if we had the reciprocal arrangements in place, wouldn't actually require that at all. And the need then for someone who's returning, who, for argument's sake, in any other country that I have not mentioned there is returning, has driven, is basically going back to scratch. And everything that happens from there in relation to insurance premium and all that. So look, the report is very welcome. I do think that we need to look at and need to agree the actions from that report, because how we treat our returning immigrants is actually a measure of our own society here as well. We should be welcoming them back home. There shouldn't be the barriers that people are experiencing. I want to mention, in relation to health in particular and health insurance, there's a big issue with our health insurance companies here as well, and I've noticed you've mentioned that here. I'm not sure that the Health Amendment Act is being applied as it should be. I have specific instances with the VHI whereby there have been a postponement period or a lead-in period before cover takes place. So I think it might be worthwhile. I see you have it here. The Health Insurance Amendment Act 2017. It hasn't been. I think that should be expedited. It is a big issue for people. If you're returning here, a young family with kids as well, it's a big issue if people can't get health insurance and can't transfer it over. I know the VHI, which is our biggest insurer in the country, I've had specific instances where I've had to write to them. I've sent examples through to the department as well. So I would welcome that. Maybe you could advise on the type of time frame for that statutory instrument. I think there would be broad support across the House for that. Look, we'll go through the other items with regard to the report. As I said, the protocol with the insurance industry, I don't see too much evidence of that. So I think that needs to be restated. And I think it needs to be republished as well. And it would be handy for us then as TDs here to be able to advise through our own clinics and our own information that protocol actually exists, and that people, when they're going in to their insurance companies, are armed with that information. Just to turn to the diaspora in a little bit more detail, I do at the outset want to say to commend all our embassy staff and our consular staff all across the world. I've had the pleasure of dealing with many different embassies and consular services. It's something very difficult. When I see Deputy O'Brien, my colleague here, when we were in Egypt last year, I saw the work in very difficult situation that the staff in the embassy in Cairo did. Former Ambassador Cole and now Ambassador Regan do an exceptional job, and they're not taken for granted. I saw the same when I was in Chicago in December with our Consul General there, and with our embassy staff in Washington DC and across the board. And I think that needs to be recognised. I think they are an absolute credit to us, but they're our front line abroad. They're our representatives, and they're what people see Ireland is and what Ireland is at. So look, that needs to be said. But we have a massive diaspora of up to 70 million, and it is a big resource for us, and it's a two-way street. I saw it in Chicago in the Irish American Heritage Centre, which the Immigrant Support Programme has also funded. People who are fourth and fifth generation Irish who are running that centre, and some of them who've never actually stepped foot in this country, but see themselves, and rightly so, as absolutely Irish and are so proud of their heritage. But we actually, more and more, particularly in America, I think we need to watch this, because less and less people are emigrating to America, that we don't lose our foothold there and we don't lose our connection between Ireland and Irish America. And that's why it's really important to keep second, third, fourth and fifth generation very in tune with the Irish heritage, through our language, through our culture, and through networking and social occasions. The GAA has been incredibly successful and useful. Everywhere across the world you go, there's a GAA club. There's one being established in Lisbon, I understand, from our Ambassador Tunney over there as well. And that's really important, because it gives a connection back home. On the Immigrant Support Programme itself, and whilst you've alluded to the programme itself, being able to be sustained through the difficult times, I would put it to you though as well, is that it hasn't increased in the last couple of years either. It sits at 11.5 million. In the overall context of the overall DFA budget, it's very small. I see the really good work. I was in London just last month, and I visited the London Irish Centre in Camden, which has been supported by your department and by government through the Immigrant Support Programme. So you see the really good work that's actually done with small amounts of money. I actually think we should look at increasing the budget for the Immigrant Support Programme substantially in the context of the overall budget, be it on ODA or in DFA budget in completely. It's tiny. and I think we can do a lot more, and I think it should be a priority for government. I think all of our parties individually, as we move on and look at our own foreign affairs policy, should really look at the benefit of the immigrant support programme, the really good work it does for small amounts of money. But if we had a bit more, 11 million, 11.5 is not a lot. And I would be asking you, and certainly you would have support from Fianna Fáil, in seeking a substantial increase in that budget. Because whilst you mentioned, I can't recall the figure in particular, you were massively oversubscribed. So we are actually saying to Irish organisations abroad, sorry, we can't fund you this year. Now, no, not every application is going to be successful, but I think there is headroom there. In relation to votes for the diaspora and votes for the Irish abroad, you know, we, Fianna Fáil in principle, absolutely support extending voting rights for Irish citizens in presidential elections, but we are aware that this requires a detailed scrutiny of practical, legal and policy implications involved. And we continue to advocate as well, and I would ask you, in your travels, I believe next week you're in Chicago, and with the Taoiseach, I would ask specifically that the issue of the undocumented Irish again be raised in the context of an overall conversation. That can't be our only conversation piece. I think our relations with America is really important, but it's a partnership. It's a partnership approach. I know there are difficulties with them. We have a lot of differences, and I do too, with the current administration on policy issues. But I actually agree with what the Taoiseach said yesterday, is that our relationship between our countries will endure. Different administrations, different Taoiseach, different presidents. So we've got to, I think, be level-headed in our approach and be practical as well. We're actually the 9th or 10th biggest investor in the US. So they are the #1 investor here, but we employ well over 120,000 people in the States. And I had the pleasure of actually meeting a number of Irish companies, particularly in the food research side of things in the Midwest in December. Really good start-up firms, Irish firms investing, employing Americans, employing Irish people. So our relationship is strong, it's deep, it's important. And it's something that we should not, we should tread carefully with as well. And I think the visit, your own visit, and other ministers who are travelling next week, particularly to the United States, should use that as an opportunity to continue to strengthen our ties there with our Irish community abroad, with our friends in America as well. And I think at this stage it would be appropriate to mention the Friends of Ireland group in Congress and in the Senate, with the pleasure of meeting again when I was in Washington DC and briefing Congressman Richie Neal and Congressman Boyle and many others, where we'd over 20 congressmen turned up that day for a briefing with regard to Brexit. I think we should be utilising in a certain way the influence that our friends in the United States, in the Congress and the Senate actually have, and because they're ready, willing and able, and always have never been left wanting for their assistance for this country. And I think that's something that many other countries would view us in a jealous way with the access that we do have and with the friends that we have in Congress and in the Senate. And I would particularly like to thank them, Congressman Neal and Congressman Crowley and Boyle and others, for all the assistance that they've given us over the years. So, Minister, I think to conclude, this is important. The Indicon report is published. What we need to see now is agreed actions on this. This need not take you know, an inordinate length of time to address some of these issues. I think it's the practical steps that are needed. The support programmes are great for people who are returning home, who want to start up businesses and that. Let's deal with the financial services issues. Let's deal with the health issues. Deal with the driving licence issues and all those practical things that the survey finds. A survey of over 1,000 returning immigrants. So it's a detailed survey, but it does make for stark reading. And it certainly shows and points very clearly where we need to improve services for returning immigrants, so that they know that there really is a Céad Míle Fáilte here for them, that there's a welcome home, there's a Fáilte Arás and a Fáilte Abhaile for all those Irish who are coming back. So I'd like to wish you well in your trip next week and in the work and your endeavours next week, and genuinely to commend you on the work that you yourself have done as Minister for the Diaspora. And I would encourage you, and I will say this at our Foreign Affairs Committee meeting later on, is we honestly have to look at increasing substantially our emigrant support programme.